Betrayal always comes when you least expect it. Victor lived an ordinary life. Work, home, family. 7 years of marriage, stability, plans for the future. He trusted his wife, believed in their love. But one night, everything collapsed. Coming home early was never supposed to change his life forever. Yet, the empty house, the darkened porch light, and a single unfamiliar address on his phone told him otherwise. He drove there, unaware of what he was about to witness. But once he saw it, there was no going back. His heart clenched, his world shattered, and one thought echoed in his mind. What now? Broken but not defeated, Victor made a choice. He wouldn't just be another man left in ruins. He would turn the game around, destroy those who betrayed him, and take back everything that was rightfully his. They wouldn't get away with this. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Now, let's get started. For most of my life, I thought things were pretty typical. Work, home, the occasional evening out with friends. Nothing too extraordinary, but nothing overly difficult either. My wife Ellie and I had been together for 7 years, married for 5. We weren't flawless. Who is? But we had our plans, our dreams. Or at least, I thought we did. It wasn't until one evening when I came home early from a business trip that I realized just how blind I had been to the truth. I'd been in Dallas that week, finalizing a deal that would set me up for a major promotion. Long nights, back-to-back meetings, the stress mounting by the hour. Ellie had been supportive, at least, I thought so. She sent me texts like, "You got this, babe," and "I'm so proud of you." Looking back, I wonder if she even meant those words. My flight was originally supposed to come in the next night, but everything wrapped up early. I didn't tell her. I wanted to surprise her. Maybe we could celebrate with a late dinner out. What a fool I was. I landed around 10 p.m. and took a cab home, but as I approached the house, something felt off. The porch light was off. Ellie always left it on for me when I was away. I stepped inside and called out for her. Silence. The house was dark. I checked the kitchen, empty. The bedroom, empty. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and checked her location. She wasn't home. She was somewhere else across town at an unfamiliar address. Maybe she was out with friends, or maybe she had to run an errand. I tried to reason with myself, but deep down, I already knew. I grabbed my keys and drove, following the address on my phone. It led me to a luxury apartment complex, sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and elegant balconies. I parked a block away, my heart racing. I wasn't sure what I was even going to do if I found her there. But I had to know. As I neared the building, it hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some random place, it was Grant's apartment. Grant, my boss. Ellie had met him a few times at work events. He was charming, wealthy, older, everything I wasn't. The kind of guy who made people feel important, special, and apparently he had made her feel special too. I circled around the building, searching for an entrance, and then I saw it. The window to Grant's apartment was open just enough. Light spilled out onto the balcony, casting shadows on the ground. And that's when I heard it. Ellie's voice, moaning his name. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I should have turned around. I should have walked away. But I couldn't stop myself. I looked inside. There she was, Ellie. The woman I loved. The woman I trusted, straddling him. She moved against him with a kind of ease, a kind of intimacy that made it clear she belonged to him, not to me. My fists clenched, my vision blurred. I wanted to rush in, to break down the door, to make them both pay for what they'd done. But something inside me stopped me. No. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I wouldn't let them see me break. I had to think this through. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I only needed a few seconds. Enough to ruin them. Enough to take everything from her. Then, without another word, I turned and walked away. As I drove, my mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many nights had she looked me in the eye and lied to me? The answers didn't matter. I already knew. Ellie was gone. I just had to decide what happened next. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove aimlessly, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. 7 years of marriage, 5 years as husband and wife, had been a lie. Every moment of it. I had loved her with everything I had. I wasn't perfect, but I had been loyal. And this is how she repaid me. Eventually, I pulled into a gas station, parked, and sat there, my head pounding. I needed a moment to breathe, to think. But the memories came flooding back before I could stop them. Ellie and I had met in college. I was a junior, working 2 jobs just to pay my tuition. She was the kind of woman who caught everyone's attention effortlessly. Blonde hair, green eyes, a smile that could melt the hardest hearts. We met at a party. She spilled her drink on me, laughed it off, and offered to buy me another. That was it. I was hooked. She came from money. Her father owned a successful construction company. She grew up in a huge house, took trips to Europe, never had to worry about bills. Meanwhile, I had spent my childhood scraping by. My dad left when I was 12, and my mom worked double shifts just to put food on the table. I never had anything handed to me. I fought for everything I had. Maybe that's why I fell for Ellie so hard. She made me believe I had finally found something easy, something good. And for a long time, I thought she loved me just as much. We had a small wedding, nothing fancy. I had just started a steady IT job. We talked about buying a house, starting a family, and we did. Our daughter, Miley, was born 2 years later. And now, I was sitting in that gas station, wondering how to tell her that everything she thought she knew about our family was about to change forever. She had always been my everything, the light of my life, my reason for getting up each day. No matter how late my work kept me, I always made it home for bedtime, for stories, for those weekend park trips that kept our bond alive. Fatherhood felt like the truest fulfillment I'd ever known. And Ellie? She always seemed content, like everything was fine. Or at least, that's what I convinced myself of. But now, looking back, the signs were there all along. How she kissed me without warmth. How her phone was always face down when we were together. How she suddenly started dressing up for girls' nights when, before, she had no problem lounging around in sweats. I knew something was off, even if I didn't want to admit it. I noticed the changes, but I refused to acknowledge them. My finger hovered over the play button on the video, Ellie's voice moaning Grant's name. One tap, and I could ruin everything. Take it all away from her. But I needed more. I needed to make sure my next move was perfect. I exhaled slowly and gripped the steering wheel tighter as I drove home. It had to be strategic. Emotions could destroy everything. As I pulled into the driveway, the house was still dark. She wasn't home yet. Good. I checked the security footage, logging into the system. She'd left around 8 p.m. That gave her over 2 hours with him. My stomach churned, and I opened the laptop we shared. I dug through the deleted messages. Software I'd installed had already recovered them. There it was, Grant's message. Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. Same place? Her reply made my blood run cold. You know I wouldn't miss it. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. I could feel the rage building, threatening to explode. My first instinct was to throw the laptop, to destroy it, to tear everything apart. But I controlled myself. I copied the messages, the photos, the videos, onto a USB drive. This wasn't just about vengeance. It was about control. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this. She didn't get home until after midnight. I was already sitting in the darkened living room, the TV off, waiting. When she came in and saw me, she hesitated, forcing a smile. Oh, you're home early. I didn't answer. I just watched her. She set her purse down, her nervousness growing as she noticed the tension in the room. Babe, Are you okay? Where were you? I asked, my voice calm and steady. She hesitated. Out with the girls, just catching up. That was a lie. Which girls? She blinked. You don't know them, some old friends from work. More lies. I stood up, closed the space between us, and pulled out my phone. Without a word, I hit play. The sound of her moaning Grant's name filled the silence between us. Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. I moved closer, my voice dropping to a low whisper. Try again. Her hands shook. I can explain. I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that escaped me. Explain what? That you've been sleeping with my boss? Tears welled in her eyes. I never meant— Don't! I cut her off, my voice turning sharp. Don't stand there and pretend this was some accident. The silence stretched on, and I asked again, How long, Ellie? She stared at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. How long? A year, she whispered. A whole damn year. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. And Miley? I asked, my voice cold. Does she know her mother is a— Ellie's sob broke my sentence. Please don't say that. I love you. I love her. I scoffed. No, you love yourself. The attention, the thrill, but not me. She reached for me, but I stepped back, pulling the USB drive from my pocket. I have proof, I said, holding it up. Messages, photos, videos, enough to make sure you never see Miley again. She gasped. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, I said, my voice low, full of menace. You're lucky I'm not sending this to Grant's wife right now. Ellie collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, she begged, let's talk about this. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. My rage wanted to consume me, but I knew better. I had the upper hand now, and I wasn't going to lose it. I want a divorce, I said, my voice unwavering. You're going to sign the papers. You're getting nothing. And if you fight me for custody, I'll make sure you lose. Her sobs grew louder. And if you ever bring Grant near Miley, I added, my voice turning to stone, I'll make sure the world knows exactly what kind of mother you are. Her tear-streaked face looked up at me, broken, shattered. Good. I turned and walked towards the stairs, not sparing her another glance. Where are you going? She choked out. To bed, I replied without turning around. Unlike you, I have responsibilities. And with that, I left her behind, crumpled on the living room floor, her cries echoing in the silence. Exactly where she belonged. This was far from over. Not by a long shot. Sleep eluded me that night. Not because I was broken-hearted or grieving, but because my mind was spinning in overdrive. Ideas were forming, calculations being made, and I was already plotting my next steps. Ellie had made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. I rose at 6 a.m. and went through the motions. Shower, coffee, everything, as if nothing had changed. I could hear her sobbing in the bedroom, probably hoping I'd walk in and soothe her, but she didn't know who she was dealing with now. I opened my laptop and checked my emails. One in particular caught my eye. Grant Moore's wife. The subject line was blunt. Something you need to see. Inside were the damning details, audio recordings, text exchanges, location data, all the proof I needed of their betrayal. I hit send. Ellie wasn't the only one who could break trust. Why had she done it? By the time I was ready to leave for work, Ellie was sitting at the kitchen table, her coffee cold and untouched. Her eyes were puffy and swollen, signs she hadn't slept a wink. She looked at me and whispered, "We need to talk." I grabbed my keys without so much as a glance in her direction. "I don't give a damn what you need." She flinched, but her gaze didn't waver. "Please, just listen." I folded my arms, waiting for her to speak. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap as she gathered her thoughts. "I never meant for this to happen," she said, her voice barely audible. I scoffed, rolling my eyes. "Right. You just accidentally ended up naked in bed with my boss. That's some oops moment, huh? She winced, but continued. You were never home, Victor. Always working, always busy. And when you were here, you were just exhausted. You barely even noticed me. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, so it was all about me not giving you enough attention? After I worked my ass off to provide for you and Miley, that's your excuse? Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I wasn't moved. I felt invisible, she whispered, her voice trembling. And there it was, the truth. Grant had made her feel seen, wanted. It wasn't just boredom or loneliness, it was her need for validation. She wasn't seeking love, she was seeking recognition. Instead of talking to me, communicating her needs, she'd chosen the easiest route, finding someone who would shower her with attention, the first rich guy who gave her a smile. I looked at her, my insides churning. This wasn't just an affair, it was a betrayal of the deepest kind. She wanted more than I could offer. She wanted more than what I was willing to give. And instead of taking responsibility for her actions, she had taken the coward's way out. Now, she would have to live with it. I didn't say a word more. I grabbed my laptop and left. By noon, Grant's wife had already replied. Thank you for this. I had my suspicions, but now I have proof. He's going to regret this. A small smile crept onto my face. One piece of the puzzle was already in place. By 3 p.m., HR called. Hey, Victor, can you come to my office? I already knew what this was about before I even stepped through the door. Grant was there, looking like he'd just seen a ghost. The moment I sat down, he snapped. You fucking psycho, he spat. You had no right. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. Oh, I had every right. After all, you were the one sleeping with my wife. I had every right to do whatever I wanted, Grant shot back, trying to stand his ground. The HR rep cleared his throat, trying to keep things civil. Gentlemen, let's keep this professional. Professional? Grant scoffed, his voice rising. Look, Victor's gone off the rails. He's harassing my family, spreading lies. I slid a folder across the desk, my gaze steady. These are screenshots of your texts with my wife, audio recordings, GPS logs, and if you want, I can pull up the security footage from your apartment complex. HR flipped through the folder, growing visibly uncomfortable with each passing page. Grant, on the other hand, had gone pale. I leaned in, speaking in a low, cold voice. You're done, Grant. HR set the folder down, turning to Grant. Grant, I think it's best if you take the rest of the day off. Grant stormed out, slamming the door behind him. By the next morning, he had submitted his resignation. 2 months later, I was sitting at his desk. Another victory in the books. But the final blow came when the divorce papers arrived. Ellie didn't beg, didn't plead. Deep down, she knew it was already over. But there was one last thing I had to do. She had no idea I'd been preparing for this moment for months. Financial records, proof of her affair, testimonies from friends who had seen them together. In our state, adultery was grounds for a no-fault divorce, which meant everything was mine. The house, the car, full custody of Miley. Ellie was left with nothing but a suitcase and a tarnished reputation. I stood on the front porch, watching as she packed her things into her car. She turned toward me, tears streaming down her face. I never wanted this, she whispered. I stared at her, my face cold and emotionless. You deserved this. And without another word, I shut the door in her face. They say karma has a funny way of working things out. For Ellie, karma hit like a sledgehammer. After she gathered her belongings and walked out, I thought it was over. I had everything. Miley, the house, the car, everything I had worked for. I had taken Grant down, destroyed his marriage, and stripped him of his career. But Ellie? She wasn't finished with me, and neither was I. That's when everything began to fall apart. 2 months after the divorce, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Victor, it's Ellie. For a second, I almost hung up, but there was something in her voice that stopped me. She sounded broken. What do you want? I asked, my voice icy. I heard a quiet sniffle on the other end. I need help, she said, barely above a whisper. Help? From me? The man she had destroyed, the one she had ruined? My first instinct was to laugh at her, but I bit my tongue. Help? You think I'm the one you should turn to? The man you tore apart, the one you crushed? I let the venom seep into my words. You've got to be kidding me. Please, she whispered, voice shaking. I don't have anywhere else to go. I leaned back in my chair, a smug smile spreading across my face. Let me guess. Grant didn't come through for you? A long silence followed. Bingo, I muttered, satisfaction creeping in. Word had spread that Grant's ex-wife had completely wiped him out in the divorce. She got the house, the vacation home, half his assets, and a generous monthly alimony check. After I exposed him, his company had blacklisted him. He was finished. No job, no future, nothing. And Ellie? She had burned every bridge she ever had. She was a hollow version of the woman I once knew. I can't pay rent, she continued, her voice quivering. I lost my job. I just need a place to stay. A sick sense of satisfaction bubbled inside me. This was the same woman who had thrown our marriage away like it meant nothing. The one who had lied to my face for months, who let another man, my boss, touch her while I worked myself to exhaustion providing for her and Miley. And now she was begging me for help. I should have hung up, should have told her to go to hell. But instead, I saw an opening. You can stay here, I said, letting the words hang in the air. There was a sharp breath from the other end. You mean it? On one condition. Anything, she replied immediately, desperation thick in her voice. I leaned in, a grin tugging at my lips. You'll work for me. You'll earn your place here. The next day, she arrived at the house. The same house she had once ruled, the same house she had once called her kingdom. Now, she was nothing but a guest, and I was the one in charge. I let her in, watching her absorb the familiar surroundings, only now, the house felt empty without her. Miley wasn't home. I'd made sure of that. I wasn't about to let Ellie anywhere near my daughter until she proved she had earned the right. So what do you need me to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I handed her a mop, watching her face twist in disbelief. You're kidding, she said, voice trembling. I shot her a cold smile. You wanted a place to stay? You'll work for it. You'll clean the house, do the laundry, cook the meals, and when Miley comes home, you'll act like a mother for once, just like you should have from the start. Her lip quivered, but she nodded. For the next 6 months, she did exactly that. She scrubbed floors, washed dishes, cleaned bathrooms, folded laundry, and cooked. Every night, she sat at the table with me and Miley, watching us as we carried on with the life she had thrown away. And every night, I saw the regret in her eyes. She had everything, and let it slip away. One night, as she washed dishes, she finally cracked. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I leaned against the counter, observing her. For what? She turned to me, tears welling up in her eyes. For everything. For cheating. For lying. For throwing away our marriage. I crossed my arms, waiting for more. She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper now. For hurting you. For hurting Miley. For being selfish. I watched her carefully. Did I believe her? Honestly, I didn't care. It was too late. You can go, I said flatly. She blinked in confusion. What? I pulled out my phone and transferred a few $1,000s into her account. Just enough to get her started, but not enough for her to live comfortably. You don't need to stay here anymore, and I don't need you. Tears streamed down her face as she covered her mouth in disbelief. Victor. Goodbye, Ellie, I said, my voice cold and final. She sobbed, but I didn't flinch. She was nothing but a ghost from my past now, and I was free. When she left that night, dragging her suitcase behind her like the weight she had become, I didn't even watch. I didn't need to. I closed the door, locked it, and turned off the porch light. She was gone for good. And still, it didn't feel like the victory I had imagined. I sat on the couch, surrounded by the stillness, alone with my thoughts. The house was quiet, peaceful. Miley was at my mother's for the weekend, so it was just me now. Just me. And the echo of the life I had fought so hard to rebuild. For the first time in what felt like ages, months, maybe even years, I found myself utterly empty. There was nothing left to fight for, no point in proving anything, because the battle had already been won. The final betrayal had been dealt with and left behind. But then, the next morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. The message simply read, "Unknown. You really think you won?" I sat up, staring at the screen with a furrowed brow. "Who is this?" I replied. The answer came almost immediately. "Unknown. Grant." I couldn't suppress a laugh. That miserable excuse for a person hadn't even crossed my mind in weeks. The last I'd heard, he was bouncing between couches, broke, unemployed, divorced, and buried under a mountain of legal bills his ex-wife was racking up against him. Just as I was about to block the number, another text came in. "Grant, I know something you don't." My smile vanished instantly. Me. "Go fuck yourself, Grant. Miley's not yours." Time seemed to stop. My fingers froze over the screen, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest, and I could hardly breathe. I read the message over and over, trying to process what I'd just seen. I'd suspected it, maybe even considered the possibility briefly, but I'd never truly allowed myself to believe it. Now, though, there was no denying it. I shot up from the bed, grabbed my keys, and sped to the nearest pharmacy. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I bought the paternity test. When I got home, Miley was already there. She ran to me, just like she always did, her little arms wrapping around my waist, her face lighting up with that pure joy. "Daddy!" she shouted. And in that instant, the weight of doubt crushed me. What if she wasn't mine? What if everything I had believed about her, about us, was nothing but a lie? I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay even despite the storm inside. "Hey, sweetie," I said, crouching down to her height. "Can I just swab your cheek for a quick science experiment?" She giggled and nodded, trusting me without hesitation. "Okay." She had no idea what was running through my mind, no idea of the battle that was happening inside me. I wanted to scream, "Please, let her be mine." 3 days later, the truth hit me like a freight train. 3 days that felt like an eternity. I could barely keep it together as I opened the email, my hands shaking. The words on the screen barely made sense at first. 99.9% probability of paternity. A breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding rushed out of me. She was mine. Miley was mine. Grant had just been trying to get in my head one last time, but the fight was over. I had everything I needed now. The final message was swift and decisive. I sent Grant a single text. "Me. Nice try, asshole. She's mine. But while we're at it, you might want to get your own DNA checked. I hear your ex-wife had a thing for personal trainers." I blocked his number without a second thought. Months later, Ellie tried to crawl back. She called. She showed up at my door. She claimed she'd changed, that she was a different person now. I didn't even dignify it with a response. She was nothing to me now. A ghost. A lesson learned the hard way. As for me, I moved on. I built a life that was mine. A life where I was free at last. This story has come to an end. Betrayal is not just a mistake. It is a conscious choice. In life, we often trust those closest to us, believing that love and loyalty are unbreakable bonds. But true relationships are tested not by words, but by actions. The key lesson from this story is to value those who stand by you and to accept that not everyone shares your principles of loyalty. The strong do not seek revenge, they learn, cut off what no longer serves them, and move forward. And the best revenge? A happy life without those who betrayed you. In the end, traitors become prisoners of their own mistakes. What's your opinion? Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from, and I'll say goodbye to you until the next video. Goodbye. Have you ever thought about how a single joke could shatter an entire life? Esteban hadn't either, until the night his wife uttered one devastating sentence that changed everything. They had dreams, plans, and a future they built together, but fate had other ideas. And in one careless moment, surrounded by friends, she said the words that broke it all apart. What did she say? Why did he walk away without looking back? And what shocking truth awaited him down the road? This is a story of betrayal, unexpected twists, and how life sometimes gives you a second chance when you least expect it. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Now, let's get started. My name is Esteban, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of how a single joke destroyed my marriage. For a long time, I believed that Melissa and I were meant to spend our lives together, but I was wrong. From the beginning, we both saw children in our future. Even before we got engaged, we would spend countless hours dreaming about our family, how many kids we'd have, what their names would be, and what traits they might inherit from us. We envisioned dinners filled with laughter, a home brimming with joy, and a playroom scattered with toys. I imagined teaching my son to ride his bike or tucking my daughter in with a bedtime story. Melissa shared that dream with the same fervor. She often talked about children with such enthusiasm, showing me videos of toddlers and saying with a smile, "One day, that'll be us." And when we got married, it felt like the right time to start our family. After years of dreaming about it, we jumped right in and began trying to have a baby. In the beginning, it felt exciting. Every new month felt like another opportunity, another chance. We even made a game out of guessing whether our first child would be a boy or a girl. Melissa brought home baby name books, and we would spend hours together imagining what our child would look like and how we would parent. But as months passed, we began to see no results. At first, we brushed it off. We told ourselves it was just a matter of time. People always say, "Don't stress, it'll happen when you least expect it." So, we waited, patient and hopeful that the time would come naturally. But as 1 year turned into 2, that excitement began to fade. Our hopeful game of guessing transformed into a quiet, unspoken hope, which then gave way to quiet disappointment. Each negative test became harder to ignore, and with every passing month, the weight grew heavier. By the 3rd year, doubt settled between us like a cold, invisible presence. We stopped talking about nursery themes. The baby name books began to gather dust on a forgotten shelf. Melissa tried to act like it didn't bother her, but I could tell. The conversations about children that once made her eyes light up now made her uneasy. She'd either change the subject or give an awkward, forced reply. We could no longer pretend everything was fine. Something had shifted. After 3 years of waiting, hoping, and convincing ourselves that time would fix it, we decided to seek medical advice. The tests were straightforward, blood samples and some routine exams. We waited nervously, hoping for a small, solvable issue, but when the doctor called us in, his words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Esteban, your sperm count is very low. At this level, natural conception is almost impossible." I was numb, struggling to understand what he had just told me. My heart pounded in my chest, and the world seemed to slow down. Beside me, Melissa was silent, her eyes fixed ahead. The doctor went on to explain that I wasn't entirely infertile. There was still a chance with medical interventions, lifestyle changes, and dietary adjustments, but I barely heard him. All I could focus on was the one thing that shattered everything. I couldn't give Melissa the family we had dreamed about. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my entire world had crumbled. I couldn't shake the feeling of failure. What kind of husband couldn't give his wife a child? Melissa reassured me she wasn't going anywhere. She held my hand and said, "We'll get through this together." But soon, her actions didn't align with her words. She stopped bringing up babies altogether. When friends shared pregnancy news or posted pictures of their children, she would either change the subject or quietly step away. At first, I thought it was just her way of dealing with the pain. But over time, I could sense a growing resentment. It lingered between us, unspoken, yet palpable. Then came the biting comments. One evening at dinner, she shook her head and muttered, "It just doesn't make sense. Two healthy people shouldn't be having this much trouble." Another time, she sighed and said, "Maybe if we'd started earlier, things would be different." These words were subtle, but each one cut deeper than the last. A fear began to take root in me, that she might leave. Initially, it seemed like a passing fear, a fleeting thought. But as time went on, it consumed me. I woke up with it, carried it through my day, and fell asleep under its weight. I tried to push it aside, telling myself I was overreacting, but the signs were too clear. Melissa was changing. She started staying out later, always with an excuse. I was just with the girls. I needed some space. At first, I accepted her explanations. But soon, her absences became more frequent, then regular. When she was home, she barely spoke to me. The small, reassuring gestures, the goodnight kisses, the way she used to curl up on my chest at night, had disappeared. Now she barely looked at me. The light that once sparkled in her eyes had dimmed. One evening, unable to carry the weight of unspoken tension any longer, I finally asked, "Melissa, is everything okay between us?" She exhaled deeply, her hand pressing against her forehead as though the very idea of discussing it was exhausting. "I don't know, Esteban. I just wish things were different," she murmured. Her words hit me hard, like a blow I wasn't prepared for. I'd given everything I had to fix what was broken between us. I'd followed every doctor's suggestion, taken the supplements, adjusted my diet, and exercised regularly. Yet despite my best efforts, the rift between us only seemed to grow wider. The silence in our home became unbearable. Some nights, I'd find myself sitting in the living room alone, staring at the pictures on the walls. Pictures of us, when we still had hope, when we still believed in each other. Now, the place felt more like a waiting room, filled with nothing but the heavy anticipation of what was to come, with no end in sight. Every word Melissa spoke after that carried an edge, and I braced myself for the next cut. "It's just so frustrating," she would say. "Everyone else is moving forward, but we're stuck." Then, "Maybe we weren't meant to have kids together." She never yelled, never directly blamed me, but her words were sharper than any argument could have been. I wanted to tell myself she didn't really mean it, that this was just her way of handling the pain. But deep down, I knew she was drifting away from me, and it was only a matter of time before it all unraveled completely. One evening, Melissa and I attended a casual gathering at a friend's house. Nothing extravagant, just a backyard barbecue with some drinks, familiar faces, and idle chatter. I wasn't in the mood to mingle, but Melissa seemed to be enjoying herself. She was drinking more than usual, laughing a little too loudly. I sat back, observing, letting the noise of the evening wash over me. At one point, the conversation shifted to children. A couple at the party had just announced their pregnancy, and the group erupted with excitement, offering congratulations and parenting advice. I'd learned to avoid this topic, but then someone turned to us. "So, when are you two going to give us a baby to spoil?" The question was harmless, but it landed like a punch. Melissa laughed, and then, without missing a beat, she responded loud enough for everyone to hear, "Esteban? Oh, please. He's not even man enough to get me pregnant." The room fell silent. Laughter died, and conversations halted. Some people glanced at me awkwardly, while others pretended nothing had happened. But I heard it, loud and clear. There was no pretending it away. I didn't say a word. I didn't argue, didn't tell her to stop, didn't question why she felt the need to humiliate me in front of people we both knew. I simply stood up and walked out. I wasn't angry, I was just done. There was no fight left in me. Once I got home, I went straight to the bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag, and began packing. Just the essentials: clothes, toiletries, my wallet. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. After zipping up the bag, I took one last look around, my eyes scanning the house that had once been my refuge, but now felt like a cage. I checked into a hotel across town, turned off my phone, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was alone. No tension, no uncomfortable silences, no more second-guessing every word that came out of my mouth. Just peace. And in that peace, I found a quiet that felt more like relief than loneliness. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to find a flood of messages waiting for me. Friends who had witnessed the scene were checking in, asking if I was okay, offering to talk. Then there were messages from Melissa, one from the night before, asking where I was, another from that morning. "Are you hurt because of what I said? It was just the drink." I stared at her words, reading them over and over. No apology, no recognition of the harm she had caused. Just a flimsy excuse. I didn't respond. And when she realized I wasn't going to, she stopped texting. A few days later, Melissa found the letter I had left behind, resting on her dresser. I'd written, "I stayed through everything, the fights, the disrespect. But if even my deepest pain is just a joke to you, then I no longer belong here." Her reply was a text telling me she had read it. I'm not sure what she felt when she saw those words, but I do know one thing. She didn't believe I'd actually leave. She probably thought I was just angry, that I'd be back after a few days or a week, like nothing had happened. But after reading that letter, I think she realized I was serious. For the first day or two, I heard nothing from her, and I assumed she was processing everything. But soon, she began reaching out, calling, texting, asking to meet and talk. I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say, but her persistence never waned. Her determination in the days that followed was unmistakable. It became evident that she had finally come to terms with the fact that I wasn't coming back. Her messages flooded in, incessant and persistent, and her calls grew more frequent and urgent. When I didn't respond, she turned to our shared circle of friends, pleading with them to intervene, to convince me to reconsider. But by then, my decision was final. There was no turning back. About a week after her efforts began, the divorce papers were placed in her hands. That was my definitive statement. No more begging, no more arguments. I was done. There was no need for any further explanations. After leaving, I rebuilt my life in a new city. The early months were challenging, being on my own, starting over. But over time, I found a sense of peace. I learned how to enjoy my own company and slowly let go of the pain that had held me captive for so long. What became most important, though, was realizing that I was more than just my ability to father children. Then I met Maris. She was different, gentle, patient, and understanding. We took our time, letting the relationship unfold naturally. For the first time in years, I felt truly wanted. A year into our relationship, she sat me down one evening. Her face was a mixture of nervousness and excitement, and I couldn't quite read her expression. Then she said, "Esteban, I'm pregnant." For a moment, my mind went completely blank as I tried to process her words. I chuckled at first, thinking she was joking. But when she remained serious, when she simply waited for my response, I understood it wasn't a joke. Confusion overtook the brief amusement I had felt. Pregnant? How could that be? The question replayed in my mind over and over. I shook my head, unsure of how to respond. "That's not possible," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The words came out before I could stop them. Maris? Pregnant? The idea felt unreal. My mind quickly searched for an explanation. She must have been with someone else. I'll never forget the pain that flashed across her face when I made that accusation. She didn't get angry or break down in tears. Instead, she looked at me calmly and assured me that she hadn't been with anyone else, that she was certain I was the father. But doubt still gnawed at me, and I wasn't about to take any risks. I had been through too much to accept something that seemed impossible without proof. I demanded a paternity test. Without hesitation, Maris agreed, telling me that I could do whatever I needed to feel comfortable. But even as we waited for the results, a heavy uncertainty weighed on me. What if the test confirmed my worst fears? It would devastate me. But what if, against all odds, it showed I was the father? What would I do then? When the results finally arrived, everything inside me shifted. I was the father. I sat there, staring at the paper, rereading it over and over, struggling to process what I had just learned. It didn't seem real. I sat frozen, gripping the paper in my hands, trying to make sense of it all. The doctors had been so sure before. My sperm count had been low. My chances had been practically non-existent. Yet here was undeniable proof that something had changed. The very next day, I made an appointment with a fertility clinic. I needed to understand how this was possible. Was it a fluke, or had something truly shifted inside me? The tests confirmed what I had once thought impossible. My fertility had significantly improved. Whether it was due to the changes I'd made in my life, the passage of time, or something science couldn't explain, my body had done what I had long believed was impossible. I wasn't infertile anymore. The irony was overwhelming. If only Melissa, my ex-wife, had shown more patience, if she hadn't let her frustration push me away, we could have had the family we'd always dreamed of. But standing there with Maris, I realized I had no regrets. My marriage to Melissa had been marked by pressure, disappointment, and unspoken grievances. With Maris, everything was different. She loved me without conditions, without expectations hanging over us. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. As for Melissa, I have no idea what happened to her after I left. I never reached out, and she never came looking for me. Maybe she moved on and built a family. Maybe she regretted everything. Or perhaps she convinced herself that her actions had been justified. I'll never know. And to be honest, I don't care. Some things are best left in the past. Some doors are meant to stay closed. I hold no bitterness about what happened. In fact, I'm grateful. Life gave me a second chance. I've come to understand that I've found someone who truly values me for my authentic self, not for what I can provide or what I may lack. She has been by my side without hesitation, offering support without sarcasm or manipulation, and never making me feel like I was constantly falling short. When I look back on everything, it's more evident than ever that love isn't just about enjoying the easy moments. It's about sticking together when things aren't so simple. It's about having patience, choosing empathy over anger, and knowing that love isn't something conditional. Melissa had the chance to stand by me and support me through my struggles, but instead, she chose to demean me. That kind of behavior, once expressed, cannot be taken back. The words that come from someone you trust the most have a way of leaving deep scars, and those scars often hurt the most. If there's anything I want others to take away from what I've experienced, it's this: patience and mutual respect are everything. When you truly love someone, you don't weaponize their vulnerabilities, no matter how upset you might be. You don't make them feel insignificant, especially in front of others. You don't let fleeting emotions ruin something that could have been beautiful. But in the end, I'm thankful for the way things unfolded because I now have someone who loves me for who I am, without any conditions. This story has come to an end. This story is not just about lost love. It's a brutal lesson that true feelings are tested not in moments of joy, but in times of struggle. When devotion turns into reproach and pain becomes a punchline, even the strongest bonds can shatter. Love isn't just about grand words, it's about weathering life's storms together, without fear or humiliation. The irony of fate is that sometimes, by losing what we once thought was essential, we find what truly matters. Because real love isn't measured by expectations, it's defined by unwavering loyalty. What's your opinion? Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from, and I'll say goodbye to you until the next video. Goodbye.